One very famous case, of course, was of someone who wasn't extradited, was Gary McKinnon.
Gary McKinnon was accused in 2002 of perpetrating the biggest military computer hack of all time, with a potential jail sentence of up to 60 years. McKinnon, who has Asperger's syndrome, fought his extradition for a decade, asking to be tried in the UK. He finally won the battle when Home Secretary Theresa May conceded that he was too ill to be extradited and blocked the order. No charges were ever brought against him in Britain.
With me now is Janis Sharp, the mother of Gary McKinnon. Janis, first of all, I should ask, how is Gary at the moment?
He's improving, but it's going to take some time. 10 years of trauma is not going to be over in a year. But it's much, much better than it was, obviously.
And let's in effect go through some of that trauma. How did it start? Take us through some of the elements of the case that you remember so well.
Gary was arrested in 2002 before the extradition treaty was even written. So at the time, there was no worry about extradition, and the CPS said that he was looking at 6 months community service. Then at the end of that year, suddenly America wanted to extradite because apparently it came to light that they thought our sentence was too lenient, and suddenly 6 months becomes 60 years, which is absolutely ludicrous. And the treaty was actually written in 2003, but wasn't meant to be retrospective, but in effect it was used retrospectively because Gary was arrested after it started being used in mid-2005, and they wanted to extradite and give him 60 years, so it was a traumatic fight.
How did it take you so long?
Well, basically, they sat on it until, America sat on it until actually we began to use it. It didn't come into effect until late 2004, so that was what most of the time took. After that, it was basically appeals, and that is actually getting done away with, the right to an automatic appeal, and it is so important to keep that, because without that right of appeal, Gary wouldn't be here. And it was just basically appealing, and we kept losing and losing, but eventually Justice Mitting, towards the end, just before the election of the new government, allowed us another appeal, and fortunately the new government refused to extradite Gary, and that was the most momentous day for us.
How ironic that it's the new government, in effect, that are talking about changing the appeal procedure, when of course it was Theresa May, the present Home Secretary, who said she was convinced that the extent of the illness of your son was such that extradition should be precluded. Do you find it a bit of a mismatch that the same Home Secretary seeking to change the appeal procedure, and she also allowed your son to stay in Britain?
Yeah, but she did intend to change the treaty, and we were quite pleased about this because this would help everyone else. But as it happens, the protection in the forum is just no way strong enough to protect people like Gary or Richard O'Dwyer or Tala Hassan. It just isn't. But Dominic Raab, he is actually fighting to bring in amendments, and with those amendments we will have some protection, much, much needed protection, because in America no citizen can be extradited for any crime that was committed in American soil. Now surely we have equality. British people must have equality. We're fighting all the wars together. We stand by America in almost everything they do. So isn't it right that they would respect our right to have equal rights to their citizens?
But these are the same sort of points the Conservative Party were making when they were in opposition. I mean, as you said, Dominic Raab is now saying that now a shabby new law rushed through Parliament without any proper scrutiny. British suspects can now face automatic extradition based on secret US evidence the FBI refused to share with the UK to allow a trial here. He's a Tory backbencher. So how is it that there's a I mean, is President Obama talking to the Prime Minister, David Cameron, behind the backs of other MPs?
Well, they have had discussions, but that's the way it seems to have been, that when this law was brought in, you could be automatically extradited with no protection whatsoever, with no evidence being presented, whereas Ireland and France, they do require evidence, and they don't extradite their own citizens if they feel that the crime was committed in their soil. I think basically that Theresa May also takes advice from advisors, and the advisors seem to have an incredible amount of power, and often it's both sets of advisors from both countries that discuss all this and work all this out. And that, to me, is quite a bit of the problem. I mean, the same people who refused to extradite General Pinochet were the same advisors who are writing about Gary and actually putting all of the allegations to the doctors that were going to assess him, which is not a very good thing to do when somebody's supposed to be assessed independently. Why do they? To me, they've been there for a very long time. They aren't elected, and yet they make quite a lot of the decisions. I really don't know why. I don't know why everyone seems to veer towards doing what America says. And to me, America always had stood up for human rights in the past, and they, of all people, should want us to have equal rights. I mean, aren't we supposed to be the closest friend?
So if those establishment people are there and the system is going to get tougher, in a future case, like your son's, presumably they would stand less of a chance.
We always had the premise of innocent until proven guilty. If you can be extradited with no evidence, locked up in a prison, lose possibly your job, your family, your home, that is not innocent until proven guilty. It's quite the opposite, in fact.
Janis, thank you very much.